Quayshawn, the questions around sex and gender having to do with female empowerment, trans, homosexual, are dominating a lot of our social discourse today. As a philosopher of science, philosopher of biology, what are some of the questions you would ask regarding this whole issue?
Well, the approach I like to take in my work is really try to get at the heart of what's at stake. Like, what do people really care about? Like, one issue that's been getting a lot of attention, because I am a sports fiend, is the appropriate way to think about and treat trans women in sports. And, it depends on the sport to some extent and so forth. But, I've been looking at some of these debates, and it seems to me that what people care about is, fairness and everyone having something like a fair shot at, winning a medal and, going on the, getting college, offers for sports, things like that. And they think, though, that the way to to do that is to go through the same paradigm we've been using. Right? But the paradigm we've been using, I think, is a bit flawed. So if you look at a sport and you want to figure out where the fairness cuts are, what you should do is do like a lot of iterations of competitions in that sport to see what the distribution looks like. An example would be, say, a 100-meter sprint track and field. I was a track athlete, past, not 100 meters, but, and you just have a bunch of people run and then see where the clusters fall. Now, what you likely see is Olympic men with the fastest sort of times, well below 9 seconds. I'm sorry, 10 seconds, not those. And then college men, and then high school boys, and then Olympic women, right? That's how big the disparities are. And so we look at that and say, well, maybe we need to separate by, gender, because we're, looking at like all these men and boys are doing well than even the most talented women. But I think that's a mistake, because we really generated that observation from rough and ready ordinary classifications of man, woman, boy, girl, and not looking at the underlying biological process that's generating the disparities that we're seeing, which seems to be things like having gone through male puberty, for example. I have some young sons, and they're playing like soccer right now, and there's the girls are just as good as the boys.
Right.
There's not really much difference, but once that male puberty hits, I'm sure there'll be a lot of differences, right? And so if you were looking at clustering the data by something like male puberty or some other like biological things that have connections to gender or even biological sex but aren't the same, then that would probably be a better way of segregating sport. But we have this history of segregating sport by gender or by sex, when these are, of course, connected, but they're not the underlying biological processes producing.
Yeah, that's fascinating. So how would you do that then in practicality? You would ask when the transition was made, and whether it was before or after puberty.
Yeah, I mean, it would be
most of the time
it'll be process based. It'll be process based.
But in almost every case today, it's after puberty, right?
It depends. It depends on if you're in California, that might not be, not be the case. But the important thing is the language of the rules wouldn't be in terms of gender.
Okay.
Which is what we're getting caught up on.
Right.
We're trying to make these separate rules for people of different genders. Right. Well, that's a rough and ready way of actually getting at what's really at stake.
Yeah. My granddaughter was the only girl on the hardball summer circuit, and all the boys made fun of her until she hit a home run. And she was one of the best players, but that was when she was 12.
Okay.
So when she was 12, and she was like 5'9", she's very tall. So 12 years old, 5'9", she was the best player on the team. But two or three years later, obviously, things would be different.
Not even close.
Yeah. And it depends on the sport. My sport is table tennis. And
Well.
women, that distribution wouldn't be the same
That's
as
right.
in track and field at all. I mean, some of the top women are really very close to men.
Yeah.
There's still a difference, but the difference is much less.
Yeah, and it would be the reverse in some, I believe, like ultra long distance marathon running,
Yeah,
like
maybe. Yeah.
women,
Gymnastics,
because of the
maybe.
structure of certain biological gifts that they have, end up doing better than the men.
Yeah. So for what is the core philosophical question? In other words, to not look at the obvious category and to try to look to a deeper level, to where the explanatory is not necessarily superficial. You have to look at the explanatory cause of what the result is.
Yeah, it's a basic philosophy of classification problem, and getting caught up with sort of traditions of how we segregated sport, I think is getting in the way of trying to figure out what the actual causally relevant breaks, what they are, and what the causal processes, underlying biological processes that generate it.